Okay, so in this tutorial I'm just going to cover how to use motionPath with a simple object, and then I'll have a follow-up tutorial that shows you how to take a more complex object and have it flow along that motion path and to form along it. So just to speed things up, I've gone ahead and created a curve. Just drew this out for my front view, and I created a little box and I gave it a little fin, I guess, at the top, just so that we can see if there's any issues with flipping that might happen, might not happen, depends on how the curve is drawn. But we just want to make sure that the orientation looks correct. So with those two elements set up, also should tell you that the orientation of the flowing object should be down the x-axis, if I remember this correctly. That's what it's going to try to take and line up along the tangency of the curve. All right, so let's go ahead and I'll just draw marquee and select both of those. I'm not sure if you have to select object then curve second, or if it even matters. Let's go to, we'll find out here in a second, I guess. We'll go to animation, and then underneath animate towards the bottom we have motion paths, and we're going to choose attach to motion path, and just so we can see what's on there, we'll set up the time slider. We can just tell it to just use the time slider as the range. So we'll kind of auto keyframe this for us. You can see the front axis is X as a default and Y is the up. So we could change that if we wanted the object to orient down the Z or something like that. And there's some other settings here for inverting or banking and blah blah blah. But I think the main thing is just setting up for the time slider. So it should set up a keyframe so that at the very beginning the animation will be at the very start of the curve. That is one thing to keep in mind here, is when I drew this curve, I started here and I ended here. So you could go into the surfaces menu and edit the curve and reverse its direction if you needed to, but just keep that in mind. How you draw it is the order of how it will flow. So attach to motion path, go ahead and apply, and we can see now that the object has aligned itself here. If I scrub through the time slider a little bit, you can see frame 1, it put a little keyframe along the curve, and frame 48, it did that there. So, and everything's flowing just fine. If the curve, let's go back and edit the curve and see if we can get some flipping to happen. Okay. There it is. All right, so what happens is in doing its loop-de-loop, it gets confused as to what the up direction is. It doesn't know which way to point. So as it moves around that curve, it flips right there. And it flipped 180 degrees. So one thing that we can do with the motion path is keyframe some of the twist. Is it front twist? Yeah. So we'll go back in here, and as that curve is, or the object is moving along the curve roller coaster, you can see where the flip is. So at frame 38 it looks fine. So in front twist I'm just going to right click and say key selected. And then I'm going to go to frame 39 and I'm going to flip it back 180 degrees. And key selected. Alright, so even though we've animated in between those 2 points, you can't see any difference. And along the curve it flows. Alright, so that's one. We'll leave that where it's at, object mode. And let's delete this object. All right, so I think actually before I go to part 2, I'm just going to save this as its own tutorial, and I'll do the other one separately.